that, and hopefully Hope is joining. Oh, girl, I'm sorry. Technology.
It's no, it's all good. I figured. I was just like, oh, it sucks. It paused. Um, but I
But we're
mean,
back.
that's
Okay.
technology, and especially when everybody is on it. But yeah,
So
so like I was
can you
saying,
start over? Can you start over? So the question at hand for everyone is
yeah.
OnlyFans exploiting gay consumers? I guess is the question. And you were talking about a model. Can you remind everybody who you're talking about?
So Lord, now his name escapes me. Flashman Wade, is his name. Or
Flash.
his
Right.
uh I guess his stage name it would be. Um,
Hmm.
so a lot of people, I think it was more so of like a Tumblr sort of deal, or maybe just like a Black gay community sort of thing for a while, because a lot of people know him from appearing on America's Next Top Model. However, he was social media famous way before then. He was one of those guys that like would be reposted and like, oh, my man crush Monday, he's so hot kind of deals. And right
Hmm.
now a lot of fire because as a man who identifies as straight, and while I don't believe that, my opinion is respectful of what people say they are and not what I think, he's kind of made it very clear that he identifies as a heterosexual man, and so I'm gonna go with that, right? However, the proof
Okay.
is not in the pudding there, so
Why don't you believe?
just sit with that.
Not that we should. Girl, we're gonna. This isn't my. Why do you think he's not? We're just getting. We're having a raw day in quarantine. Why do you think
So
he's not being truthful about how he identifies? And we can't tell people who they are. But girl, what's the tea?
right, right. So the tea is, if you've ever stumbled upon any of his content, it is very homoerotic and it is
Hmm.
very gay male leaning. So it leans very much so towards the side of appealing to men and like to see, and especially gay men. He does a
Okay.
lot of, pictures where his hole is exposed. Just and very
This is so not on brand for me. This is so not on brand for me. Oh my God. I'm like, Hope, but we're adults here. Like children should not be up this late. But maybe he's just marketing. Maybe he understands his audience and he is marketing to that audience.
so okay, so here's my problem. This brings us back into the brain, right? I think a lot of people's issue is the fact that Flashman is very avid about being a heterosexual Black male. However,
Hmm.
the ways that he goes about marketing himself and the ways in which he goes about making and attaining money is specifically geared towards gay and LGBT people. Now, what I want to
Uh-huh.
raise and what I like to raise, for I'm all about accountability, that you cannot be upset with people for capitalizing and you've essentially made them demand within the supply chain. So all
Oh.
he's doing is supplying what a lot of these men are demanding. And now that some of them are seeing that he's made over $100,000 in a month off of the demand that they are paying because he's just supplying a demand,
Hmm.
upset. And while
So to be clear, I'm just slowing down. So apparently, allegedly, there are some people in our LGBTQ community who are upset, some of the gay men who are upset that he's making so much money from their patronage.
correct, correct.
I
And
mean, what, so what's the issue? Okay. So
right,
the question is like, what? You just
there,
froze there for a second, Hope. Hopefully it'll unfreeze. Jesus. Okay, there you are. You're back.
mhm.
I moved to another room because I think just to get better reception. But so why are we shouldn't be mad at him. Shouldn't we be upset with ourselves if we're patronizing this person and their so people are upset. So the question, so just to be clear, people are upset that there's a straight man making all this money from mostly gay men.
Yes. Even though
And the gay men are upset,
gay
apparently.
men are
Is that
upset,
what?
that he is
Okay.
making money from them. However, they are the ones that are paying for the service. And so they are upset because he is capitalizing off of the service that they are indeed paying for. And I think that when we think about it, just on a general scale, right? If we come out of Flash Man territory and I don't like the idea of heterosexual men praying to the appeal of gay men. However, I don't like the idea that gay men are so sort of bewildered by masculinity and what that looks like, right? That they put themselves in situations where these men can, sort of, capitalize in this way. It's one of those things where it's a catch-22 and it's a double-edged sword, because this is what a lot of gay men strive for. They strive for these men that are unclockable, and these men that have
In
these,
the parlance, the old school language is straight acting, right?
right?
And back in the old school, I don't know if people still use that language. I'm older, so they're straight acting. What was it? No fats, no femmes, straight acting with the whole. Bless their hearts.
Like I do. I'm not a fan. I'm definitely not a fan of the heterosexual men taking advantage of it. I think that there just has to be accountability on our part as the LGBT community to stop allowing these men to be the focus of our affections, especially considering that on many scales, a lot of them do not care about, patronize, or support what we are, what we do and who we are as people. So I just,
It's interesting. I feel like I think about this as not anything new. I just remember being back, being older and just being in New York and going when I went to the clubs and was in the clubs a lot, and I went to gay clubs and all the go-go boys were straight, like all the the hot go-go boys. I remember I um, had some of their attention. Yeah, I mean, back in the '90s, I like may have, you know,
uh-huh,
indulged with the go-go boy.
and a little,
And I don't, and I don't know, like sexuality is so fluid and so, it's so complicated, but I think I think there's just such larger questions about, because there's like, my brother likes to talk about, my brother has been in a relationship with a man for 15 years. He doesn't like the term gay. He prefers practicing homosexual because he likes the idea of practice more than orientation, and he thinks the term gay is a white bourgeois construct. And so a lot of what my brother talks about is being culturally gay, right? That there's a culture around being gay or LGBTQ, and then there's a practice of like having sex with men, right? So these are two different things for him, and he's someone who's very openly and himself, in he doesn't subscribe to anyone else's language for who he is, and he has no shame around, being in love with his boyfriend and engaging in homosexual, practice. But there's a thing of cultural gayness he thinks of, and then there's like the practice of it. And so I sometimes I wonder if there's for men who are straight identified who have sex with men, or who um, allow themselves to be patronized by gay men, if they're on a spectrum around sexuality, or it's just like I have to make a coin. I don't, it's just so complicated, and I think at the end of the day, it's really about the supply and demand, really. It's like who is the consumer of this? And I think there's a larger question too with our gay brothers of all races around the ways in which a certain kind of masculinity is valorized and celebrated, and a certain kind of, and I feel like the new generation, younger people are like embracing like
yeah,
boys who are femme and on or more fluid in terms of their gender expression, but like I think there's a larger question for our gay brothers, the ways in which they engage in toxic masculinity, and there's so many things. I had a conversation with a friend today who's a black gay man for a podcast, and it'll come out soon. And this conversation actually happened after the podcast, but there's questions too, I think, for our gay brothers about their racism and the way that racism plays itself out in sexual practices,
yeah,
particularly ways in which they fetishize black men,
yeah,
and a certain kind of black men, and the way, and I say this because the ways in which black masculinity is fetishized seems to be in tandem with the ways in which this sort of toxic masculinity is fetishized and that gay brothers have. And I'm like, I'm saying this is from it as an outsider. I'm not like, and I don't know if this is the conversation I should even be having, right? That we should be having. But as an observer and as someone who has who has a number of Black gay male friends who have reported back to me levels of like being called the N word during sex without permission, um, all sorts of ways in which they're approached on dating apps that are just straight up racist and fetishistic. Um, there seems to be a larger question that is tied to masculinity and race that our gay brothers need to be having around the ways in which they're having sex and approaching people sexually. And so that seems to be not unrelated to this male model that you mentioned and his being patronized by our community.
I first of all, I 110% agree with that. I just think that before they move into having that conversation, there has to be a conversation around male healing, right? And what does it look like to actually be a man and be considered a man in 2020, right? It's a lot different than it was back in the 1980s and the 1970s. And there needs to be, I guess, acknowledgement of evolution. We're not seeing a lot of that. There's just kind of sort of this gradual fade that everybody is expected to have. And there are still some
Mm-hmm.
people that are stuck in the ages. Communication about men being able to heal in safe spaces for men. There's a lot of talk about women and spaces for women and how women can
Mm-hmm.
grow, women can, do this and ways that women heal. But there's to be able to celebrate what it means to be a man, however that shows up in the world. And I think that
Yeah.
when we get sexual spaces and we see a lot of our gay male friends engaging in behavior that is risky or just almost just kind of self-degrading in a way where it just becomes like, why are you doing this? Like you do realize that you owe yourself better than what is being offered to you, and you can get that, but you have to acknowledge that from this situation, you know what I'm saying? From this situation, you can move forward anyway. But there's a lot of need for heteronormativity and masculinity that I don't think allows a lot of gay men, whether they're Black, white, Asian, or indifferent, to experience change in that way.
Oh, you just froze again. I don't know if you're frozen for everyone. I don't know if I'm frozen. Okay, you just moved a little bit. Say something. Oh, there's something to.
Uh,
There we go.
There has to be a good conversation around what the expectations are as far as how we want to move forward. Because I think that even outside of gay men, there is racism that happens within the community, period, right? And there's colorism that happens within the community as far as trans, women go, and there's colorism that happens as far as Black gay men go. And then there's a bunch of isms that happen with little, subgroups that we just don't discuss. And I think that as far as sex is concerned, a lot of we go through as LGBT people comes out and comes up
Oh
and
yeah.
out
Oh
in
yeah.
sex. People feel really vulnerable during sex. And I think that that's why a lot of that self-hatred or that racism or those isms manifest, because in that moment, it's like, oh, I'm allowing you in my body and in my space, so I should be able to say what I want to say to you in this moment, or vice versa. You're allowing me in your body and in your space, so I should be able to do whatever I want to do in this moment. And it just
Mm.
becomes the very toxic situations, which is why we have DL culture, which is, so there's a whole bunch of stuff in discuss.
I think the bigger question for those folks who identify as male and in terms of these questions of what does it mean to be a man, what is their relationship to toxic masculinity and to patriarchy, and really have um, Matt McGorry has been talking a lot about the way he's talking about fat phobia is really brilliant over on his Instagram page. And he, in a comment I read of his recently, it was a great reminder. He was like, we're all fat phobic. We're all living a fat phobic culture, right? We all live in a culture that reinforces certain ideas about certain bodies, right? And so thinking about that in terms of racism, right? That we all are in a racist culture, right? That we all have internalized various ideas of white supremacy. And so our work is to understand that and then to begin to decolonize our minds, to begin to like unpack how we're fat phobic and in patriarchy. Like we all have grown up in a patriarchal culture, whether no matter how we identify in terms of our gender. So many
Right.
women are invested in patriarchy in ways that are deeply troubling and problematic, right? So understanding that and saying, okay, we've all grown up in a patriarchal culture and have like internalized all these ideas and ideologies of this culture. What then can I begin to do to unlearn that, to live differently so that I'm not perpetuating that today? And I think that's a lot. I've done a lot of that work, and I still am doing that work, particularly around as I date, being a woman who dates men. It's, you know, straight identified men. It's like, what is my relationship to patriarchy? Is something I ask myself all the time, and I think I've divested a lot of that. And I have very clear evidence of like the kinds of men that I would approach or not approach, but like pursue or allow myself to be pursued by when I was in my 20s and 30s, and like the men that I date now. It's completely different. So I definitely am like, the allure of sort of like, I went through a period when I loved assholes. I loved like these guys who I thought, because I thought like this dating an asshole was like, he's strong, he's powerful, he's in control. And so these douche guys I like chose to date. I just, it's embarrassing to say in public, but like I chose to date these douchey like Wall Street dudes or like, you know, even hip hop dudes or whatever. And when I lived in New York, and I was just, and I look back and I'm like, oh, and I was treated horribly, right? Of course. And that is not even sexy to me anymore. And so like that, but that's so much work I've done on myself and understand what I'm like, what is that about? You know, how did I internalize that, and what, and how do I unlearn that? And so that is, I think we're attracted to what we're attracted to, but I think things that are harmful to us, for me, I need to interrogate that. And I think patriarchy is harmful to everybody. I think it's harmful to the patriarchs in terms of really being, unless you're just into power and you've just, you know, completely separated yourself from like vulnerability and humanity, and all you care about is power. There are people like that, and there are people who are in pain and who are hurt and who are perpetuating this stuff. And so I think there's a lot of questions around, for people of all genders, divesting of patriarchy, but like for men specifically, doing it in a way that is not about demonizing them. I think a lot of men feel like they're, particularly white men, feel under attack right now, that they're like, though, and my last two boyfriends were white men, you know, straight white men. So I don't hate straight white men, you know, I don't hate them, but I think that like not feeling attacked, but have understanding that, I think if we can have a structural understanding that we all internalize this stuff, and then it takes away the like, I'm being attacked right now. It's not like we're attacking you. It's like, well, this is a cultural structural thing. It's an ideological thing that we've all internalized. And how do we begin to unlearn it, like individually and then collectively in terms of our culture and then our institutions? Girl, I didn't know I'd be getting this deep
So
like at this hour.
it, it pulls out. You said it was a whole question, and it was, but it's. I think that first and foremost, because some of the stuff that you said like really triggered thoughts in me about the ways in which we see women, right? As trans women, and especially as trans women who weren't allowed to transition very early on, there is this idea of what women look like and what women go through, and how women are supposed to behave, right? And so while you're absolutely right, there's your thought process of like what you like and what you're attracted to, but then there's also this underlined thought process of what makes a woman, and especially very early on, like growth, as it happens, you start to realize that I can sort of define what that means for myself. But I think very early on, and this is not just for trans women, I think it's for all women, right? We look at what makes a woman, what makes the women around me, what makes the women that inspire me, what makes the women that seem to have bad reputations or negative reputations around who they are. And then we base our existence off of that for so long until we figure it out. And so I think we all go through like a douchebag phase where like, well, my sister was dating this jerk, but she was in love, and so I have to do that. And if I'm in love, then I should follow that. And for a while, my aunt was in a relationship with this guy who was just complete trash, but eventually, you know, and then I think eventually there is a growth moment, and there is that moment of like complete clarity where we all wake up and say, you know what, the system has got me and I am done. And I think that even happens for men where they have a moment, there's an aha moment, and it's just like, you know what, I don't want to be this guy. I don't need to be this guy, you know. And but I think that there has to be experience, growth to happen naturally. If there is no
Yeah.
experience, then there is no thought process to look back on, or no mistakes to feel like you need to correct with time, and so therefore nothing changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what is it? What is the test that creates the experience that creates the change? And sometimes we have to hit a rock
Mm,
bottom to really change. And
mm,
I don't
mm.
recommend rock bottom for anyone. It's not cute. Anyway, Hope, Giselle, Hope Disguised. I adore you. I love you so much, girl. And I don't. Your question about agent, how to get an agent, like yeah, I answered that to the best of my ability. I don't really know how you do that in 2020.
I and my best. I need to figure it out though, because
Do you want an
like
acting
I
agent? Are
know
you
that
interested in acting, or an agent for acting, or an agent for something else?
so I am thinking about getting into the acting like we talked about on the podcast. And I'm trying to figure it all out because I want to be able to transition smoothly, without leaving behind my activism. And so
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of seize the duality in that. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
been really challenging because I'm just like, well, I don't know, like, should I put myself out there online and, hey, I'm looking for an agent? Like, do they come to you? Do you go to them? Like, how does this work? And I've just been struggling.
Yeah, and you're in DC. I don't know if DC is the best place, but well, the
It's
interesting thing now about the acting world is everything is self-taped, so people are spinning themselves on tape. So I know actors who don't live in New York or LA, but they live somewhere else. They put themselves on tape, they book something, then they go to New York. But I think they lived in New York or LA at one point and got their agents. I I don't know. I really don't know how people are getting agents now. I mean, I got I'm with ICM now, but my manager Paul was my agent, then became my manager, and like we went to ICM after I had an established career, and so I don't know how a young actor would get an agent beyond being in an acting studio and doing an industry workshop or I don't know. Sometimes if you book something too, if you can find a way to start auditioning, if you have friends or if you can befriend a casting director, sometimes this is okay. This is another way, and I think about it. If you can find a way to, I think the advantage about being trans is that I mean, there's so many trans out now. Today there were fewer of us. So then, like, if you didn't have an agent, if you knew a casting director, you could like say, "Oh, I'm trans." You can get an audition with that and be seen by that casting director. And if you book something, if you're in something, that may help you to get, you know, to like send your reel to someone, or if you have a friend, if you've been in something and you have some work and the agencies value, they might take you on. And if they see they a lot, ultimately an agency getting an agent is about whether they can make money off of you, whether or not they feel that you're bookable and they can make money from you in the beginning, you know. And sometimes, I mean, Paul, when he took me on 13 years ago, I think he just saw something in me, and I had years of not working. I was like, this man's gonna drop me. I was like, why is he keeping me? I was so nervous about Paul like dropping me because I had years of not working, like over the past 13 years. There were like literally years of like not booking anything, and I was just kind of like, okay,
like away
well,
from
I have an agent. But so if you can start maybe casting directors do workshops as well, and they do them at acting studios. And so getting seen by a casting director or finding if you have actors access, if you're on actors access and you can
yes.
submit yourself or backstage and can submit yourself for something and book something, and then and maybe people see it, that helps. I mean, these are just I'm literally just kind of brainstorming right now. I don't really. I got my. So you should talk to somebody who recently got an agent. So anyway,
But thank you. I appreciate it. The conversation was stimulating as always.
as
And I'm gonna
always.
let you get back to the Vern squad. I don't even know what do we call your fans? Like, because I
I
have my
had
hopefuls, but what do we call?
a girl like years ago started calling me the Laverne Hive, but that didn't feel right because it was like Beehive and Laverne Hive. I don't know. Like maybe we should have asked my fans to like come up with something because it really should be them, you know.
How do you want to identify yourselves?
How do you identify yourselves?
How do
Yes,
you want to
indeed.
identify your?
Hopefuls is great. You know, a friend of mine, a really dear friend of mine, he's the only person who calls me love. He calls me love. So, I don't know. We could maybe the Love Army or like I
Love
don't
them.
know. Yeah, Lovables or something. I don't
Lovable.
know.
It'll
I
be a
should
love
actually
bug.
be. That'll be actually. I should ask the fans what they want to call themselves. That's a good. That's the. I had never thought. I haven't really thought about that. So we should
Story.
ask them. Yeah. Yeah.
Story. Just put a poll in your story. Always works.
Yes.
The love bugs. Oh, that's
Absolutely.
cute. The love.
The love bugs. Oh,
Love.
the love bugs.
I love bugs. Oh, that's you doing that.
My love
Hey,
bugs.
my
Hi, love
love
bugs.
bug.
I love that.
Oh,
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 Hope,
that
you
is
may have come up with. We should poll it. We should ask them if they want to be called love bugs. I love that though. Love bugs.
so cute.
That's really cute. That's really cute. Oh my
I
God, it
like that.
worked. I'm like shiny right now. I changed rooms and I'm like, I need to wash my face. I love you, Hope. Thank you so much for being
Love you,
you
Hope.
and just doing you the way you do you. I love you. I love you. Get some sleep. It's late there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Bye, girl. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. That was an impromptu conversation with Hope Giselle. That was, we went to places I did not plan to go tonight, which I love. I'll